I wish that we didn't have to be here today. I wish that there had not been hundreds of years of wars and occupations of majority Muslim countries by the West. I wish that no one had flown airplanes into the New York's Twin Towers, that no one had subsequently invaded Afghanistan, that Australia and the rest of the coalition of the willing had not invaded Iraq in 2003, and in the wake and in the chaos, another army had not sprung up to try and take over land there. I wish that world leaders had not created a myth that Muslims were backward and unable to rule themselves in order to justify that invasion and war. I wish that we didn't live in a chaotic economic system based on greed and profit that went into crisis in 2007, and that politicians around the world had not decided to scapegoat Muslims and immigrants in order to distract us from their own failings in that crisis. I wish that we did not have a prime minister who is so shamelessly desperate that every time he goes down in the polls, he makes a speech vilifying Muslims. I wish that we had a political opposition in this country that was big and courageous enough to offer people hope of genuine change, and that there was a real alternative to the overwhelming politics of fear that we get fed every day. I wish that an unstable person did not take people hostage in a cafe a short distance from here, and I wish that no one had died in that cafe. And most of all, I wish that far-right racists and fascists and neo-Nazis had not been given these gifts by our political leaders, gifts that they are now using to spread their message of hate and intolerance, and a message that we know that will result in people being attacked and humiliated on our streets, on our trains, in the stations, and in their workplace, and that is simply not acceptable. We can't change any of those things, but we can try and do something about it. And I'm so proud of all of you brave people who have come here today in the middle of the long weekend, in the middle of the pouring rain, to say enough is enough, to say that you stand for hope, for peace, for tolerance, for inclusion, for a world where we can all share and learn from each other, and for standing up and speaking out if you see a racist attack, and most of all, for standing up and speaking out when racists try to organize and spread their message of fear and of hatred. Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to invite one of the people who initiated this rally to come and speak, Camillo. And it's a fantastic story, actually. Camillo and some of his friends who are not particularly connected to any political organization recognized what was happening, and they are the ones who initially started the Facebook group that's led to us all being here today. So thanks so much, Camillo.
Thank you, Penny. I'm not going to take up much time. I just really wanted to thank you all very much for coming out, for showing solidarity in the face of the xenophobia that is occurring down at Martin Place. So thank you all very much for coming. Just be aware that there is the potential for people to come down here and attempt to incite some sort of confrontation. And we just need to stand strong in the face of that. Do not take anything personally, and try to avoid any sort of backlash that might come from that. And yeah, just thanks for coming, and keep your ears open, because there's going to be a lot of important things said today. Thanks.
Fantastic. And for our next speaker, I'd like to invite Nick Roemer to come and come up to the stage, if you're here, Nick. Nick is a senior lecturer at Sydney University. He's a member of the NTEU, that's the University Union Branch Committee, and he's active in opposing the attacks on universities that we've seen happening, and also in supporting the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign that aims to bring attention to the racism of the Israeli government. And for that, he and another member of the university's staff, Jake Lynch, are under significant attack, and it's possible that Jake might even lose his job over that. So thank you very much, Nick. Nick is also very active in the Refugee Action Coalition in Sydney, and that's really important because that is one of the main ways that our government also tries to stir up racism and hatred of people for their own political benefit.
Thanks a lot, Penny. Today of all days, it's especially important to pay our respects to the past and present elders of the Gadigal people. Let's look around us. This land we're standing on is surrounded just behind me by the Supreme Court. There are two important churches just opposite. There's the Mint and Barracks, and there's the New South Wales Parliament. In other words, there are the central institutions, the central political and ideological institutions of the European invaders who dispossessed the Aboriginal First People of this country. And those invaders have been brutally dispossessing Aboriginal people for over 200 years. But this and the rest of Australia always was and always will be Aboriginal land. It was never ceded, and no racist rally down the road and no amount of racist government interventions or forced community closures will ever change that. Far-right groups see today's Reclaim Australia rallies as a fertile recruiting ground. And that's one reason why it's so important that everybody is here today. Anyone who's glad not to live in Europe at the moment needs to remember this. There's absolutely nothing about Australia that makes us immune from the racist and openly Nazi groups that could take off here as they have taken off in Europe if the right social and political conditions existed. We can lament the rise of UKIP in the UK, the Front National in France, Jobbik in Hungary. We can deplore the anti-Islamic Pegida movement in Leipzig and throughout Germany. And we can lament as the neo-Nazi Golden Dawn grow in influence in Greece. But there's really no point wringing our hands. What we have to do is act politically, and act politically now, to stop their allies organising right here in Australia. That's why this demonstration is happening. We need to make sure, though, that we focus our attention on the right culprits. No doubt there are quite enough people down there in Martin Place who should be arrested and tried for racist assaults. We know, as a matter of fact, that that's not likely to happen, because as the opinion article by Asma in the Fairfax Press yesterday made very clear, when she was the object, she and her family were the object of a racist attack only a few hundred metres down the road here, the police were more interested in the incidental windscreen damage that was inflicted on a third-party motor vehicle than they were on the racist attack against her and her family. Shame! Shame! Anti-racists' main opponents, though, aren't the violent but still pitiful organised fascist groups in this country. Once today is over, they'll crawl back under their rocks from Martin Place and continue their sad propagandising into their half-baked YouTube videos. Only a handful of misfits, reprobates and criminals will ever take them seriously. And that's the largest political following they can ever hope for, and they get what they deserve. What we need to worry about, more than them, are the political forces that can mainstream Islamophobic racism in this country among ordinary people. And reading the Facebook discussions on the Reclaim Australia pages, we can see close up the sorry farrago of confusion, alienation and fear that feeds Islamophobia and other kinds of racism in Australia today. And who is it, we need to ask, that incubates and nurtures all these anxieties? Not the Australia First Party or any of the other deranged microsects. Racism in Australia is fostered by the major political parties and by their respectable power base in the political, media and business establishment. You know, is it any wonder that ordinary people are vulnerable to Islamophobic racism when all they ever hear from Liberal and Labor politicians is how our most urgent priority has to be to stop the boats? When Morrison, Bowen, Dutton criminalise asylum seekers from Islamic countries and give us to understand that the mere fact of asking Australians for help is enough to justify protracted and intense torture on Nauru, Manus or in Villawood. Is it any wonder that racism is fostered in this country when Reza Barati is allowed to be murdered by thugs in the employ of our governments and nothing is done? Is it any surprise that racism is on the rise when politicians ignore the largest hunger strike in Australia's history? Over 800 people starving themselves in February, and when the media almost don't report it at all. So racism and xenophobia certainly don't originate in the community, as we're so often led to believe. They originate in the efforts of the political classes. So it's not the people down the road that we need to mainly oppose. It's the barbarians, and I use that word advisedly. It's the barbarians in federal parliament who scapegoat and dog whistle anyone who isn't in Team Australia in a bid to distract the public from their own failure to create the conditions for a just and peaceful society in this country. Shame on them. Now, politicians' racism, of course, is abetted in all sorts of subtle ways. It's principally abetted by the mainstream corporate media, with only a few honourable exceptions. They can be relied on never to report the real news, but to endlessly traffic downwards envy, the hysteria, the racism that exists to drive wedges among ordinary people and distract from our society's real and serious and urgent problems. Climate change is just one of them. It's abetted by the corporate world, in companies like Serco and Transfield, raking in indecent profits from refugees suffering at the same time as claiming respectability as sponsors of art exhibitions and high culture. And something that's close to me, it's embedded in the universities, whose leaders congratulate themselves on their enlightened freedom from prejudice, but think it's reasonable for students to pay even more for their higher education so that governments can free up funds from the public purse for use on persecuting refugees or deploying to Iraq or giving tax breaks to polluters. Now, no one is going to stop any of that if the community doesn't speak out. We're not at this demonstration as spectators. This isn't some titillating Saturday morning political entertainment. We and everyone at counter rallies like this one around Australia have a very serious and urgent responsibility, and that is to organise against the spread of racism against this country. Organise against the spread of racism in this country. And we can start by inviting people to the protest against the forced closures of Aboriginal communities on the 10th of April. And then, furthermore, we can invite people to the equally important rally for refugees at 1 p.m. on the 19th of April in Belmore Park. Stopping torturing dark-skinned asylum seekers and letting Aboriginal people live in dignity and respect for their culture go hand in hand with striking out this scourge of Islamophobia from this country. Now, I'm going to end in a minute, but before I do that, I want to make one last point. That's this. No one is going to do any of this for us. I think everyone here knows that quite well. We can't look to the political establishment or to the establishment classes in general to lead the way. The struggle for peace and harmony has always been led from below, from the street and the megaphone. It's not been led from above, from the pulpit, the dispatch box, or from the lecture theatre. Reclaim Australia wants things never to change. We're not so deluded. I think I can say that we understand that change is not something to be resisted. Change is the precondition of identity, not its undoing. We reject Australian nationalism and the exploitation, war and colonial oppression that is its flip side. Australian isn't an identity, it's something printed in your passport. We will not stand by and allow Islamic racial hatred to take deeper roots in this society, racial hatred of Islamic people. We won't allow that now, we won't allow it ever. That's our message to the crowd down there in Martin Place, and much more importantly, it's our message to Abbott, Shorten, Morris, Brandis, Bishop, Bowen, Miles, Dutton and all the others. The day will come and we look forward to it with enormous expectation, when they will be tried and convicted in the court of public opinion for the sadistic cruelty they have orchestrated and justified to people of Islamic origin and other refugees and Aboriginal people. Congratulations to everyone being here. Thank you for listening to me. Let's continue the struggle, first at the rally on the 10th against the forced closure of Aboriginal communities, then on April 19th at the refugee mobilisation. Thank you.
Say it loud, say it clear. Racists are not welcome here. Say it loud, say it clear. Say it loud, say it clear. Racists are not welcome here. Say it loud, say it clear.
Racists are not welcome here.
Say it loud, say it clear.
Racists are not welcome here.
I'm sure many of you know the reason that we're here today. We're here because there have been 16, and that's important that we recognize that, 16, although not necessarily all of them may finally go ahead, but it's a lot and it's scary. Racist demonstrations called all across Australia today. They're based on a lie. They're based on the lie that Muslims are taking over this country and that Australia needs to be reclaimed from them. Nothing could be further from the truth. Muslims, like Aboriginal people, are the most vilified, marginalised and attacked people in Australia at the moment. And when politicians and the far right attack and scapegoat any member of society, it makes us all weaker. But when we stand up like this, we are stronger, and every person here today represents many, many more who could not come or did not have the confidence to come. We can grow stronger from here, and I believe that they will get weaker. Now, there's an important thing to recognize about this gang down the road. If you have a look at their website, or even if you look at the placards that they're holding today, they're pretty bland. So they've got things like reclaim equality, reclaim gender equality, our women are equal. Now that was a bit funny because clearly it's not written by a woman. Reclaim free speech, reclaim democracy, reclaim freedom from terror, reclaim tolerance of our ways. There is not a single placard they have about halal food, even though making halal food illegal is one of their 10 demands. They have a simple strategy, and it's been repeated many times by the far right. They try to appear to be respectable people, raising concerns just held by ordinary, average people, and they try to appear respectable. And it's possible that many of the people down the road may actually believe that. But there's an important post that was made on the white nationalist website, Daily Stormer, that gives away the real strategy. And here's what it said. It encouraged white Australian men to attend the rally, saying, "The people that you'll find at the Reclaim Australia rally are very valuable to us in the long term. They're on the right track. And with our guidance, they can be turned into hardcore Nazis." That is exactly where the politics of scapegoating lead. And that is why it is so important that we oppose them, that we clearly denounce them as racist. We expose their links to the far right. We expose their links to groups like the Australian Defence League that have threatened to blow up mosques and to kill Muslim clerics. We expose their links to the great Aussie patriot Sherman Burgess, who's recorded songs calling for violence against Muslims, and to expose their links to groups like Pegida that are trying to make anti-Muslim racism respectable all over the world. So, for our next speaker, I don't think Ron is here. You'll be up next, Paul. Our next speaker will be Paul Keating. Paul Keating is the Deputy Branch Secretary of the Maritime Union of Australia, which has a fantastic history of opposing racism in all its forms over many, many decades, hundreds of years, well, 100 years. And we're really pleased to have Paul and other members of the Maritime Union here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Firstly, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the people on the land which we meet today, the custodians of the land. This is Gadigal land, and the people of this nation are the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present, and would also like to extend my respect to any Aboriginal people who may be here today. I think it's very important for us to understand that the dehumanising of peoples in this country goes back 200 years. Systematically, with a system to disenfranchise and remove people from the land that they are from, that they own. And the relevance of that today is that struggle, that dehumanising of our brothers and sisters, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, continued. We must be the voice of reason, the people of this country that believe in all those human values of decency and respect. We must remove what the system that keeps our people shackled to a system that dehumanises them. And today we find, again, the rise of the right and right-wing organisations. We find the rise of racially motivated organisations like this Reclaim Australia, the anti-Muslim sentiments, and my good friend Nick has said very much everything that I was to say, and I will continue with that same narrative. The reality is we don't have a political leadership in this country outside of the Labor movement and the people of this country. The political system has failed Australians, going back to the Tampa affair. The rise of the right has its origins in a direct connection to the prosperity or the economy of the world. And when that declines, we see the rise of these haters, these racists, whose sole intent is to subjugate people and communities to their own means, or eliminate, annihilate. The Tampa, I want to tell you a story about the Tampa Wilhelmsman and what occurred at that time in 2001. I was a waterside worker on the job, I still am. I've been elected as a leader of maritime workers here in Sydney. But when that occurred and it unfolded and that ship docked here in Darling Harbour, the birthplace of the Waterside Workers Federation in 1872, those dock workers, wharfies as we call them, stopped work. They walked off the job and they applauded the great courage of that captain as he finished his last voyage. And that was the conscience of ordinary people saying, we will not tolerate this, we will not give up. And I must say this, we must always recount history, because the old hatreds of fascism of the 20s and 30s and 40s in Europe finding a place again. We can directly connect the decline in prosperity and the collapse of economies to this rise of hatred. But I had a look at the website in regards to Reclaim Australia, and it's a very telling tale where they explain that those that come along that wish to participate in their rally to leave their Nazi placards and white supremacist information at home. So that is the type of people that we know that these organisations represent. We also know that these haters, because that's what it says to me and to all decent Australians, all decent people the world over, that these rallies are designed for those old hatreds to come back to the fore. These are people that are haters of decency, haters of the very human rights that we, for generations, have fought for. The very space that the union movement has always taken ground. Why? Because the union movement are you. The union movement is an organisation based always from our communities, and those values of our communities are the values of the union movement that are based on true self-determination and democracy, true empowerment. So we can't talk about this and discharge the very structure that we live under from their obligations, because the very rise of fascism and racial hatred bears its foundations in the collapse of the global economic system. We see that rise of the right, and if we recount what occurred in Europe, these people in these racially motivated rallies across this country today, they say they're patriots. They're not patriots. That war in Europe back in the 30s and 40s was a war against evil, a war against fascism. And the people that fought in those wars generations earlier did not fight for the rise of hatred to come back. They fought for the decency, the community, the freedoms that we see, the way Australia has developed. We have a country that is multicultural. Our prosperity is based on our freedoms to exercise our rights, our human rights, our exercise and our freedom of speech is only one part of it. So I say this, the MUA is here, will always be here, because in our industry we have workers from all over the world, and we work with those workers from all over the world. Their struggle is ours. We understand each other as maritime workers, and we understand the political change that must happen to empower all people. The gap between the rich and poor increase. And it'll only be our change as a movement, as people, to that will remove, unchain those shackles. So the MUA is here, will always be here, and we will be a vocal advocate for all our brothers and sisters in all our communities. Thank you.
Muslims are welcome.
Racist or not.
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 We are Muslim black and white.
One struggle, one fight.
We are Muslim black and white.
One struggle, one fight.
We are Muslim black and white.
One struggle, one fight.
We are Muslim black and white.
One struggle, one fight.
And this German organization called Pegida, it stands for Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization of Europe. And if you search for Pegida Australia, you'll see that they're using exactly, they've got a Facebook page set up, they've got a few thousand people liking their Facebook page, they're promoting today's rallies, and they've got exactly the same graphics and kind of language that they're using as the rallies today. So there's a very, very clear link. But I think there's also a great story there, because frightening and scary as Pegida was, they mobilized 25,000 people in Germany at their largest demonstration last year. They targeted refugees. They tried to create a respectable face for racism. They caused attacks against Muslims to increase. Anti-racists were able to build a broad alliance and mobilize against those attacks in even bigger numbers to call them out for what they are. They're splintered. Their leader exposed himself by posing as Hitler with a slogan at the bottom saying, "He's back." And once people started to realize the real nature of the organization, people stopped coming to their demonstrations. And I think there's a great lesson there for us. It shows that these people can be turned around. And so recently in Montreal, they tried to have a demonstration. No one turned up because there was such a good job done making people aware of who these people actually were and what their agenda was. And the same thing happened in Edinburgh. They advertised a demonstration. and no one actually turned up to their own demonstration. So that's fantastic, and that's a good lesson to us. But we can't be complacent. Like I said, they've got 16 demonstrations around the country today in Australia. They're also advertising demonstrations in London and in 2 different towns in Germany. So we need to do everything we can to raise awareness, to talk about what the real nature of these racists are, the fact that they're out there recruiting for neo-Nazis and building the terrain where more people will get attacked and harassed and create the kind of society that none of us want to live in. Our next speaker is Kuranda Seyret. I believe he's here somewhere. He's from FAIR, which stands for Forum on Australia's Islamic Relations. And FAIR works to promote a better understanding of Muslims and Islam through grassroots education programs and through the media. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Hi everybody, really appreciate everybody coming out today in this type of weather. It just shows you the resolve and strength that we have against this very important issue. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we stand and meet today, and I wish you peace and blessings as we traditionally do as Muslims. And I was really happy about your chant. It's nice to have that welcoming feeling, but also we shouldn't really need it. We're all Australians. Well, I thought I'd start off by a bit of satire. So I think that IS, its brutality is unparalleled, and we've been hearing about beheadings and rape and persecution of Christian minorities. We understand that they are an evil, evil death cult, and we know that they hate us, not because of who we are, but what we stand for. Things like the Gaza bombing of 2014, Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay, Afghanistan, Iraq, Bosnia, Kosovo, Chechnya, the First Gulf War, the Second Gulf War, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the list goes on. Yes, Muslims are bad. Very, very bad. Not good for this country, bringing their Turkish bread and diarrhea-inducing doner kebabs, their heartburn-causing hummus, and their fattening falafel, and not to mention their tuberculosis-inducing tabbouleh. Pure evil. Since those Muslims have come to this country, there's been nothing but chaos and really great restaurants and cafes. Nothing but more baklava, great coffee, chicken shawarma, and fantastic meze. Enough is enough. We are onto you, Muslims. We know what you are planning. Populate and take over. First it's our suburbs, then our schools, and eventually you will get into our politics and start changing our laws, making Australia a sharia state. Everyone knows what a sharia state means. No more beach volleyball. You can say goodbye to belly dancing and BLTs, and no more Mardi Gras. It's a win-win, don't you think? Ironically, they are calling today Reclaim Australia. What actually are they reclaiming? James Packer is reclaiming more than this so-called rally to build Barangaroo. The indigenous population has lost more than these people over there claiming to reclaim Australia. They really should be the ones reclaiming Australia, their lost heritage, their culture and their land. It's an insult to call this Reclaim Australia. These are the same people who believe that this land was unoccupied in 1788. Let's just assume for a moment that something was actually lost. What could it be? Let's see, have they lost anything of value other than their dignity, their moral compasses, their grip on reality? Actually, they haven't lost anything, but they are just plain lost. Is there any fact behind their claims? Let's keep this in perspective. There are roughly 500,000 Muslims in Australia. That is 2.1% of the population. In 1990, the percentage was 1.7%. So in 25 years, it's increased by 0.04%, meaning that in another 50 years, the population of Muslims in Australia will be roughly 3% of the overall population. This is fear-mongering at its worst. Not really sure what we're actually afraid of. They say Muslims want to change our way of life, that they have nothing else to do with their time but just plan and plot on how to bring down the infidels. The irony is that most of the Muslims that have come to Australia escaped regimes from their homelands that were despotic and tyrannical. Others came here for a better life. Most are economic migrants, like my parents. Why would you bite the hand that feeds you? In fact, Australia is more Islamic than the places they fled. It's a Clayton Sharia state, the Sharia you're having when you're not actually having a Sharia state. And what about the B word? Another fear-mongering campaign. In fact, did you know that there is not even one woman in Australia who wears a burqa? Quite amazing, and we're banning it. Well done, Fred Nile. Shame. Anyway, my friends, I don't need to tell you just how normal Muslims are, how organic their values are, how much they care about their children, how they care for their elders and their modesty. Of course, they're like everybody else. They have their fair share of problems, like drug and gambling addictions, crime, domestic violence, and so on. These are societal issues and have nothing to do with faith, culture, or ethnicity. But our redneck friends do not want to see any of these issues in their own reflections. In fact, they have temporarily suspended all mirror gazing today. Today is a day of denial for them. Deny that Australia has criminals in their prisons who are not Muslim. Deny that Australian men beat their wives and they are not Muslims. That Australians steal, cheat and deceive others or for financial gain, and they're not Muslims. There are rapists. There are other people in prison. They're not all Muslims. But today is Happy Denial Day for them. I'd like to end on a serious note. The racial vilification that has arisen off the back of this group is affecting many, particularly women who have been assaulted, spat at, intimidated and attacked, making them afraid to leave their homes or to walk alone in public places. It surely is a sad indictment on where our nation is currently at, when in the 21st century, so much so that, in the 21st century, Australians are actually afraid of other Australians, so much so that they are prisoners in their own homes. Yes, I have unashamedly parodied these bigots amongst us and their absurd notion about reclaiming something that has never been lost. But I would like to reclaim something of my own. I want to reclaim Hummus Day today. I want all of those other people at the rally, the handful in denial, to give back every hummus, every falafel, chicken shawarma, kebab, tabbouleh, baklava they have tasted. Give it all back as if it never existed. Let's go back to the 1951 when all we had was meat and free veg. Give it back, Australia. What more can I say? It's just plain and simply stupid.
Thank you. Muslims are welcome. Muslims are welcome. Muslims are welcome. Muslims are welcome. Now, I've got some news for you that I wish I didn't have. I wish I could say that there were only 10 people down in Martin Place and that the demonstration had been a complete flop. But unfortunately, the report that I've been given is that there are actually a few hundred people down in Martin Place. And that's an enormous shame. I wish that wasn't the case. And I think it gives us an indication of how serious the problem that we're presented with right now is, and the work that we need to do to turn this situation around. And it's an indictment of Tony Abbott, of all our politicians, that they have allowed this situation in this country to go this far, that there are demonstrations of a few hundred people openly racist, openly targeting other members of our community, and as we've just heard, making them feel unsafe to leave their houses. Shame, yeah. I'm really proud that we have come together to have this demonstration today. We've done an excellent job in getting out another message. We've done an excellent job in making sure that they were not the only voice heard here today. We had every piece of the media here today, lots of radio stations, lots of TV, and print media as well. And they all heard another message from us. They all heard another message clearly denouncing the people down the road as racist, as neo-Nazis, and exposing them for what they are, and presenting another vision of what this country should be like, and what the ordinary, normal majority people of this country actually think about the kind of place that we want to live in. So thank you to every single one of you who's come out today and who's helped us do this. And I'd just like to remind everyone that we are dealing with a bunch of serious, nasty people who have a tendency to go out and get tanked after their demonstrations, at which point they become even stupider and even more nasty. So as you disperse from this rally today, please keep an eye on each other. Please keep sure that everybody that you're with is safe, and keep an eye out for each other. But thank you so much again for coming. Muslims are welcome.
Racist or not.
Muslims are welcome.
Racist or not.
Muslims are welcome.
Racist or not.